With us today is Dr. Melody Wachsmuth, joining us from Zagreb, Croatia. Um, Dr. Melody was originally from the United States, but she has been doing research among the Roma people for well over 10 years now, from what I can gather. She is also one of the founding board members of the Roma Bible School, which we heard about from Brother Sasha the last time we held this prayer fellowship. So without further ado, I'll hand the following time over to Dr. Melody to tell us a little bit more about her work in Croatia with the Roma people and with the Roma Bible School, and most importantly, how we can pray for them as well as for her in her work. So take it away, Dr. Melody.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. And it's fun to see some good friends in this group and also some people I haven't seen in quite a long time. So I feel that we are among friends here, which is always nice. Well, although some of you know my backstory a little bit, for those of you that don't, I wanted to share just a little bit about how I got involved with work among the Roma. I came over to Croatia in 2011, and my intention was to come over as a mission researcher and writer with the idea to see what God was doing in the area of former Yugoslavia and write about it, write articles about it, interview local leaders, interview missionaries, and just try to get a feel for what was going on, and then provide that as information for other people, to be useful for the global church. So I didn't come at all with the idea that I would be working with the Roma. I didn't really know anything about the Roma, and but since my question is, what is God doing? It wasn't too long. In fact, within the first month that I ran into some Christian Roma and immediately began learning about the Roma and what God might be doing. And then as I began to travel over the next few years and, interview a variety of different people, I always kept encountering more Christian Roma and people that I would interview and learn from and listen to. And I began to really see that God was doing some really interesting things in different Roma communities and with different Roma leaders across the region. And so that's kind of how I got involved. I started at a local level. I started tagging along a Christian Roma couple who was evangelizing a village, and just kind of Sundays I would spend following them. And at that point I couldn't even speak Croatian, so I was just observing what I could observe and seeing what I could see. And eventually they started a church, and I ended up becoming an elder of that church for about 8 years. That was in Eastern Croatia. And so I was kind of learning both at a more global level in terms of traveling in different countries and seeing other Roma ministries, but also learning at a very local level as a weekly church service and church ministries. So at that point, I had a lot of questions that all of this learning had raised for me. So I decided to do more formal research and started my PhD in 2013. And it took me quite a while to finish it. Just finished it in 2020. And my topic was essentially understanding Roma Pentecostals in Croatia and Serbia. And I did ethnographic research in the community that I was based in Croatia, and also another community in Serbia. So that kind of unlocked some new areas of research for me, because as I was gathering stories, people's life stories, I realized, especially for the women, how much trauma that these women had lived through in their lives, and how it primarily was unresolved trauma and lingering under the surface, and oftentimes resulting in a lot of physical issues and things like that. So that was one major learning point that my research kind of opened up for me, which I hope in the future I can do more with that. More research, but also more practical ministry ways of helping people heal from some of their trauma. So that takes us up to about 2020, when our whole globe sort of stopped and changed with the arrival of COVID. And at that time was when I'm sure you, as you heard from Sasha last time, how it began, the whole Roma Bible School, we began to meet as Sasha was appointed at the last Roma conference in Sarajevo. He was appointed for the region of former Yugoslavia to sort of be the facilitator to get this project up and running, which he's done an amazing job at facilitating that work. And he asked Mickey, Pastor Mickey, and myself to be part of that board. And so during these lockdowns, and we just started meeting with people and gathering information and researching and strategizing and planning, and got a whole lot of input from a whole lot of people, which was very, very helpful. And had to postpone our starting date a few different times. And finally, we started, as you know, in this year, or wait, no, last year, no, this year, March 2022, with initially starting with 20 students. And so I can share a little bit about that, some of the challenges, some of the encouragements, and kind of where we are now as a school. So now we've gone through 6 sessions because we took 2 months off for the summer. And for those of you who weren't here to hear Sasha, just as a understanding of how the school works, it's a traveling school. We go to different locations every month, and it's 1 weekend a month. And we have a group of teachers that we've been working with. And those teachers, there'll be 2 teachers per weekend that attend the sessions. And so part of the reason for that is to expose the students to different contexts, different Roma contexts, and see different local churches. And the reason why that's valuable is one of my first learning points in my first few years of traveling around and interviewing people is to realize how different Roma contexts can be, depending on country, depending on language and specific cultural practices and things like that. And of course, you compare a context that's in a Muslim context versus one that's a more Catholic or Orthodox. It's very different customs and things like that. So, I mean, my learning continues because I was just at Pastor Mickey's son was married about a week ago, and married actually a girl also from the Bible school. They're both Bible school students, which was kind of fun. And they have very specific customs down in Leskovac for their weddings that we don't have in the Roma group that I was working with in Croatia. So anyway, that was very interesting to see and experience all that and continue to learn in different contexts. So anyway, to continue, we began with 20 students, and unfortunately for various reasons, we've lost a few different ones, and now we are down to 12. But we're encouraged that we feel like this 12, now they've been coming every month, and they're starting to really form as a group, which is, I think, critical to keeping them encouraged to continue coming, because it is quite challenging for some of them if they're working to take the time to, and if they have a family, to leave the family and for the whole weekend, it's quite intense, and then come back and go back to their job. I was speaking with one of the students this last month, just the challenge of trying to do his homework. We don't assign very much homework, but just a little bit of work to keep the student active and thinking about things and practicing maybe some things that they've learned in the last session. But this particular student, he's out all day chopping people's wood. And it's by the time he comes home at night, he's exhausted and he's got family responsibilities. So he was saying very difficult to find space to do homework. Another important element of our school of keeping the students encouraged and invested is the role of our mentors. In fact, we have a mentor here in this group right now. Sokrat is one of our mentors. And because sometimes the student might feel discouraged and entertain thoughts of giving up. And that's a key point for to connect with the mentor to listen to them and encourage them. And in fact, we just had one student who was thinking to quit, and she missed the last session. And after, she felt like the Lord encouraged her, and then she spoke to her mentor, and now she will rejoin us again. So she will, that was really good news when I heard that. I'd been praying for her. So I would say the school is as a pilot program, it's a wonderful experience. It's very challenging. We have students with very diverse educational backgrounds, from students who never really went to school to students who are planning to go to university. So that's a huge difference of educational backgrounds, which can complicate the learning in the school. But we really want the school to be for anybody, regardless of educational background, that they can get more training to be more effective in their ministry. And so as teachers of the school, we are really trying to experiment a little. In this part of the world, people are very used to just kind of lecture style of learning. But I knew early on, that wasn't not going to be that effective, that we needed activities, we needed interactions, we needed experiential learning as well. So our teachers have tried to incorporate activities as well as their lectures. And that is really helpful for the students. So with this group, we have another year. They will finish next September, and that will be the completion of the program. So I have a few pictures, if I can share, just of our process here, so you can see some of the students. So here is just the team in the early days, planning and strategizing. We had a lot of meetings. Here are some of our teachers, not all of them, but some of them. We have a mix of Roma and non-Roma teachers, which is wonderful. And here's some of, perhaps Sasha showed you some of these pictures. This was, we had some workshops for the teachers to help us develop our subjects and kind of help us to get all on the same page in terms of how are we going to teach and how the subjects related to each other. And Brother Ulf there, who's speaking, he has been very important as a person, as our advisor, as our teacher, because he has started Bible schools all over the world. So he has a lot of experience, and we see that God really brought him to us to advise us and help us. Here are some of our fellowship times we were working. And here's one of the, I think the earliest session, the first session, and you can see some more kind of hands-on learning going on there. This, I believe, was Pastor Francis, Dr. Francis, his session where he was teaching. And this is, now we're trying to give the students more opportunities to either give testimonies or even preach in the local churches. And this was, we went just a little ministry and one evening to a village, and these are the two students that were just married. They are sharing some music, and we had some testimonies as well. We try to give the students also time to, on their breaks, to walk around the town, wherever town we're in. This was in Lebanon, our first time our school met, just kind of getting to know each other. This was when we were in Osijek, Croatia, at the seminary there, which was another wonderful partnership. We're trying to encourage between the Roma Bible School and the seminary in Osijek, which is an evangelical seminary, international evangelical seminary. This was our last session in Slovenia, which the students really enjoyed. Most of them had never, well, I don't think any of them had ever been to Slovenia, and they were really astonished at the differences between Slovenia and some of their context. And so it was a really good learning experience for them, and then to experience Slovenian church. And this, our student from Macedonia, he shared his testimony, and it was really moving because he had throat cancer and didn't know if he would ever be able to speak again. So I love this picture because it's him joyfully sharing his testimony as he told the Lord, if you give me my voice back, I will serve you. And he's really an excellent and mature leader. So this was in Slovenia, our last group shot from last month as a school. So I hope that gives you a little bit of some faces of people, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to share about the Bible school. We really need your prayers. We really need your prayers for student encouragement to stick with it, for learning. I feel quite passionate about this project because I feel like it can be really critical in beginning a movement to form these new leaders who will then have influence on who knows how many people in their communities, whether they become an official church leader or not. That's, in my mind, besides the point. The point is they become a discipler of other people and lead other people in whatever context they end up in. And especially critical in this as I'm thinking about the constant migration that happens from east to west with people seeking work, that they become, if any of these students, whoever they disciple, or if they go to the west, that they become missionaries wherever they are and serve the Lord and lead people wherever they are. And I know in that way, it could have a really big impact. So we welcome your prayers for the students, for the teachers, for the mentors, for unity and for encouragement and just protection from, I would say, so many things. Protection from the plans of the evil one, who of course wants to disable this whole project, and protection from illness when we need to travel, and it's quite logistically complicated. Even now, as we're planning to go to Macedonia, it's to bring all these pieces together and to figure out who's traveling with who to save the most money that we can. But I see that it's really worth it to get students in different contexts, get them out of their comfort zones, get them out of what they know, and that helps the learning go much quicker. So in the last few minutes I have, I also just want to share about my future research. My book of my PhD is coming out soon. However, that's probably just mainly going to be for academic institutions and things like that. What I really would like to do is to take some of the highlights of what I learned and convert it into a more readable, maybe 100-page, maybe even less, like a mini book, and get that translated into some of the local languages here, so that it can be helpful for people, so that my research can help other leaders, what I found out, and maybe even spur on other people to do more research. So that's one of my future goals. And that's another area to be praying, just in terms of where do I go here with that research that I did, and how can I practically, this knowledge I gained about this unresolved trauma and the impact of that in communities, how can we also equip people and leaders to know how to help bring that into healing or healing spaces? And I know some people here, Ratko was here earlier, I know he's thought about that issue and things like that, but that's one of my questions, and especially for the women, because I feel like oftentimes they are put to the side and discarded, or just not much is expected from them. And so my heart is also to help equip them so they see themselves as co-laborers in the kingdom, and they see the gifts that they have to bring to God's kingdom. So I think I'll stop there and you can ask questions.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Melody. And so I guess in terms of questions, there may be some of us here today who are new to this series of Roma Prayer Fellowship, and therefore are not so familiar with the Roma people. So allow me to quickly respond to one of the questions in the chats. The Roma people are more commonly known as gypsies, although the term gypsies is considered disrespectful or even offensive to them. So they call themselves the Roma, and which means, I believe, people in their own tongue. So so that's what they call themselves, and that's how we refer to them in our mission information as well. So so I hope that clears that up. And I think there's also a question about the traveling Bible school concept. So if maybe Dr. Melody could elaborate on that a little bit for those who didn't maybe get to hear Sasha share about that last time, how that works. So you mentioned, already logistically, that's a bit of a tangled web to sort through. So things like border crossings, or how they go to, how often they meet, how that all gets worked out. If you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so actually it's gotten easier now that you don't need to do COVID tests across borders. So border crossings are much easier. But essentially we figure out who's coming to that school, to that particular session, which hopefully it's most or all of the students. And then we figure out kind of carpools, who's picking up who along the way. And for those of you who haven't been to some of these countries, you just have to realize that these are small countries, and it's not so hard to drive from country to country. The two that are furthest away are Macedonia and Slovenia. So that's the most challenging. What we started to do with those students that are kind of the outliers, if it's in either one of those locations, it's cheaper actually just to fly them from one to another, but everyone else goes by car or bus together. So yeah, it is a bit of a challenge, and we'll see how that continues on in the future with the next, Lord willing, if we have a second generation, if we make any tweaks or changes. But we did try 1 month online, and it was definitely not at all successful. It's just not the right context for online learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even here in North America, we experience a lot of difficulties with online learning. So I can only imagine how much it's exacerbated in Eastern Europe context. Now, you mentioned that this being a pilot project, and also a second round of students, Lord willing, if you'll move on to that, how do you see that proceeding? Like, when and how will the board, so you and Pastor Vicky and Brother Sasha, when or how will you be deciding on potentially moving on to the next step?
I think we're already intending to probably in the spring start asking for student recommendations. How we did it before is we asked pastors. We've been working very closely with local churches. And so the advantage of that is that a lot of people feel like this is our school. It's not a school, it's our school, because a lot of the local pastors have either they've been part of the teaching team or working closely to recommend a student. But I think we've already decided Sasha has a long list of things that we would do differently for the next generation. And one of that is probably how we admit students, and that process, maybe doing an interview with the student and that kind of thing. So probably that will happen in the spring. And I mean, this whole endeavor is such a faith project. Part of me is surprised we're this far. It's really been an act of Lord opening doors and showing us next steps. And so, I mean, we're just trusting that there will be a second generation and that this will continue. Because in reality, Christianity continues to grow among the Roma. So there is a need for this. And so we hope and pray that there, come spring, when we start talking to the pastors again and seeing who they're recommending, we'll see if we have second generation.
Amen. Now, speaking of growth, you did mention that you began with 20 students for the first generation, but it's gone down to 12. I'm just curious, were there extenuating circumstances of why that has happened, or are you concerned about that's come to pass?
I think, well, yeah, every person who dropped out, it was sort of for different reasons. Some of it was job related. They just couldn't swing it with their job. Some of it was struggles in their own church, and we didn't want to get between their pastor, and we have to be very careful about that. So yeah, I mean, in one sense, for the pilot, we were only going to actually take 15, but then we had 20 applicants. So we decided, okay, we'll take 20, even though it's kind of too many for the pilot program. So, when it went down to 15, I was like, okay, now we're at 15. But then when it went down to 12, I think if we get any lower, I will be very concerned. And talking to our mentor, Brother Ulf, he says, if you're bleeding students, there's a problem. And the thing is, you want the school to be popular, because that's how you're going to get your next generations, by word of mouth, where students saying, wow, I learned so much. This was a transformative experience for me. You should do it, but if some of that's missing, then we really need to make some changes. But this last month in Slovenia, I was really encouraged, because it really felt like the students were becoming one group for the first time. Because keep in mind, they're coming from different contexts, and sometimes there's a language barrier, for example, between Slovenia and Macedonia. And especially there was a core group of students that were all from one area that all knew each other. And so some of the students were kind of on the fringes, on the outskirts, but now it feels more like we're forming to one group. And so I feel encouraged that that'll help students stay invested in the process.
Okay, that's good to hear. Now, I know that you mentioned, at least in the prayer requests we received from you, that next weekend you'll be teaching on mission for this school. So along these lines, Dragan asked if you're planning short mission trips with the students as part of their training. And myself, I was hoping to ask maybe more broadly, how do you see the Roma people participating in missions or in the mission of God?
Yeah, well, in regards to the first question, that is a great idea. I mean, I think I would love to incorporate a short-term mission project, maybe not with this generation because we're still trying to figure things out, but I mean, taking, a group to go serve with Brother Ratko in Bulgaria for a few days, just so they can learn a new context and be involved in serving. I think that those are the kind of experiences, those real experiential things that I want to really make part of the Bible school. So hopefully for the future, we can do that. In terms of the mission of God, yes, that's the topic for this coming weekend. I am introducing biblical themes of the mission of God, and I feel relevant to the Roma, and I'm really hoping the students will kind of grab onto those and see themselves in different ways, part of God's story, and maybe give them a bigger view of what God might be doing through them, not just in their context, but wherever they go. As I said, if they end up traveling or whatnot, I want them to understand themselves that I'm always an agent in God's mission, no matter what I'm doing and where I'm going. And I think that's the real transformative perspective, that it's not like, okay, now I'm in my normal life and now I'm doing ministry, but I am an agent of God's mission, and he's calling me to many different things. So I think, I think the Roma have a very important part to play in European Christianity, and they have been playing an important part, but there's still that divide between kind of mainstream Christian events and then Roma events. And my hope is to see more and more of those two things cross over, and so that Roma Christians can be influencing other Christians and vice versa, and more shared fellowship and unity among Christians in Europe.
Okay, maybe one last question then before we split up into groups. And since you mentioned Radko in Bulgaria, I got a question from him in the chat, and you may have already touched on this a little bit in terms of transformations you're hoping for coming out of your class next weekend, but perhaps more broadly, just as the school itself overall, what are your hopes and expectations for how you'd like to see the students transformed, maybe in addition to what you've already mentioned?
Well, yeah, this is still an area of development as well, because I mean, certainly they will get a certificate of recognition when they finish the school. Now, the tricky part is, and this is part of the reason why we really need to work closely with local churches, because I want that to mean something. It's obviously our school is not an accredited school at a country level or state level or something like that, but I would love it that it would mean something, because that pastors could recognize, wow, this person does have some good character development and knowledge coming out of the school, and I would love to use the student in ministry. So I think that's going to take some time. I mean, I think people are going to have to see some results, and for the certificate to have more than, let's say, paper meaning, for it to mean something like, wow, you went to the Roma Bible School. Ooh, I would love to work with you. I'd love to minister with you, because I know that you've got some good training and that you've gone through some character character formation in the school. So yeah, that is kind of a work in process, because Radko's question, it's not like a magic formula. The school ends and all of a sudden they'll be working in their churches or doing other ministries or whatever. I think it's probably be more gradual than that. And of course, some of them are already in ministry. They're mature Christians and they're already serving. So this is just kind of adding icing to the cake, so to speak. But some of them are younger, 18, 19, and they're just kind of getting going in life, and who knows where God will take them. So probably just one step on their journey.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Melody. Now, before I turn the time back to Pastor Francis for announcements, and then we'll go into prayer groups, I'd like to share the screen with your prayer requests. And if you can walk us through real quick, so we will be aware of how to pray in our small groups. So here it is.
Yes, so that first one is sort of what I was talking about, for the perseverance to make it through, and also this transformational learning, that it's not just something in their head, but actually they've made some changes in their life. All of us teachers, I think we're learning and growing, and just that we would be humble and willing to learn from our mistakes, and learning to willing to accept feedback one from one another. And I think so far the attitude has been quite nice amongst the teachers, encouraging and open and humble, so that we can continue and learn and grow as teachers as well. I would really love your prayers for me next weekend. I'm going to be kind of teaching in Croatian and English, because a lot of my concepts are in English. So I'm not quite sure how all that's going to go, but I would really love if you could just support me in prayer as I teach, and as the students are doing a lot of interactive work that hopefully they can learn. And then fourth, this kind of what I was mentioned about some of my future writing projects, thinking about how best they can serve the church. So those are my main prayer requests.